What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing some battles submitted to the channel by Reptilian82, who's running a reptile-like theme team for the Open Master League with Shadow Tyranitar, Shadow Salamence, and Rayquaza. Now on the face of it, you'd expect this team to be completely dominated by Zacian, but that's where Fire Blast comes in. So many trainers just did not expect to see this move coming, especially from the Shadow Salamence, and it was able to completely turn a game on its head. Now I often don't get the opportunity to showcase some spicy Master League content, so if you do enjoy this video, please make sure you leave a like and hype the video to show your support and let me know that you want to see more content like this in the future. Anyways, with that being said, let's just get straight into the question of the day. What do you think is the best reptile-like Pokemon in Pokemon Go? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Alright, so go into the first battle, leading Shadow Tyranitar into Kieran White. So this is going to be a decent matchup for us. Of course, we've got Dragon Breath as the fast move. We don't, however, have access to Stone Edge, but the opponent does not know that. They're going to go straight for a Fusion Flare that is resisted damage, which we're able to tank relatively comfortably, and now farm up to back-to-back Brutal Swings. Brutal Swing, number one, going to be shielded by the Kyurem, and now we can fire off a second one straight away. Brutal Swing, number two, going to be double shielded, and so we swap into our Shadow Salamence. Of course, going to have to shield this in case they full send the Ice Burn, which they do, but now they swap into their Zacian, and the opponent, do they know about the Fire Blast? Well, it doesn't really matter, as they've got no shields. Fire Blast gets the one shot. Get that Zacian off my screen. Shout out to Jamie Finn for that quote. We fully Dragon Tail, farm them down there. They actually get the farm down up against the Ho-Oh as we try to throw on good timing, but it doesn't really matter. We still got our shiny Rayquaza in the back. We tried to catch a charge with the opponent holding on to the energy here, actually going to be able to fully farm down the Tyranitar, but it doesn't matter at this point. They cannot store back-to-back charge moves. The opponent fires off the Brave Bird, but now, of course, we can go straight for Breaking Swipe, and Breaking Swipe, whilst not the hardest hitting move anymore, it gets the KO, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we see Reshiram in the lead, so once again, decent matchup for us, as we're hitting for super effective damage with the Dragon Breaths. We can go for a Brutal Swing, once again farming up to a potential Stone Edge, and then baiting with the Brutal Swing. We can go for a second Brutal Swing, and this time they will no shield. However, we're also going to no shield. The opponent, again, going to bait with a Fusion Flare. We don't mind that, and this should just be another Fusion Flare. The opponent not going to reach a potential Draco Meteor or a Stone Edge, and so the opponent now going to come in with a Reshiram. Unfortunately, not running Outrage here, but we can go for Brutal Swing, and since we farmed up a lot of energy, the opponent ends up using their final shield. Now, we're going to come in with the Rayquaza. We have a 2-shield advantage, but the Zekrom does have quite a lot of energy. So the opponent is going to fire off the charge move. We're definitely just going to play this safe here. The opponent going to bait with a Fusion Bolt. That would still hit for neutral damage there, so no messing around. Going to go straight for Breaking Swipe, and Breaking Swipe gets the KO. They're now going to come in with their final Pokemon, a Kyogre, but we can reach the Dragon Ascent, and Dragon Ascent is a really strong move. It gets the one shot up against the shiny Kyogre, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, really tricky lead matchup for us as we see Zacian in the lead this time around. We're going to swap out straight away, and the opponents, they certainly don't need to swap out here, of course. This is still a really dominant matchup for the Zacian, but then they swap into a Necrozma, Dawnwing's Necrozma, which is double weak to Brutal Swing, whilst we're absolutely loaded on energy. This is a huge mistake. We grab both shields, and yet we still reach another Brutal Swing before they get even to a Dark Pulse, but we're actually going to go for an undercharge, and then swap into Tyranitar. This seems like a really strange play, but this is going to be smart because now the opponent comes back in with the Zacian, and they just don't know about Fire Blast. They're trying to farm us down. They think they wall the energy, but nope, Fire Blast gets the one shot there, and let's see what the opponent wants to do. They come back in with the Necrozma just to be farmed down, as they've also got a Lunala in the back. Also, another Pokemon super weak to the Brutal Swing. We put them into range where Rayquaza can just Dragon Tail farm them down, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we're going to see Heatran in the lead, which is a bit of a tricky Pokemon for us to deal with, but they're going to swap out and try and catch a Stone Edge, most likely, onto the Garchomp, but that's fine with us. We're not on Stone Edge, of course, and now we can just farm up to a ton of energy. We are going to shield here, and the opponent's actually going to go for a Twister, which means maybe they're not on Sand Tomb, but instead something like Earth Power. Either way, we're going to farm up, go for another Brutal Swing, continue to overfarm, and we're trying to catch a charge move here. However, I don't think they're on Sand Tomb, so they go for a Twister, which is super effective damage. Now that puts us into range where just a Magma Storm will be enough damage to get the KO. Actually, nope, never mind, that doesn't quite get the KO. Even better for the opponent, as they then get the Fire Spin farm down. I'm not really sure if maybe that was a slight undercharge by the opponent, in which case, if it was, that was a very smart play. But we're going to come back in with the Tyranitar, tank a Magma Storm, full send the Fire Blast, and Fire Blast gets the KO. But their final Pokemon is going to be Lugia. Lugia, one of the bulkiest Pokemon in the Master League. This is going to be tricky, even though we do have access to Brutal Swing. It's super spammy. It's still going to be a very much a struggle to try and take out this Pokemon. However, the opponent makes life easier for us as they try and make a catch there. They did not need to do that. We weren't going to reach back-to-back Brutal Swings, whereas now we have the energy for it. So we go for the second Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing gets them very low, and we're able to swap, make the catch. I don't think this makes sense. Oh, sorry, I don't think this makes a difference. That's what I meant to say, as we can still Dragon Tail farm them down, or Dragon Breath farm down with Tyranitar if we didn't make the catch. But either way, we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we're going to see Mewtwo in the lead. The opponent's going to be safe swapping into Zacian. And you know what, we're just going to stay in. We're going to full send the Fire Blast. And Fire Blast, unfortunately, is actually shielded here. That is quite surprising. But I guess since we stayed in with the Tyranitar, what else could we have done there other than full send a Fire Blast? The opponent ends up shielding, but are they going to shield this time around? Well, unfortunately, they're going to slightly outpace us here. Go for a second Behemoth Blade. Do they double shield the Zacian? Fire Blast, number 2, not shielded this time around. They're going to come in with a Palkia, and we can reach a departing Brutal Swing before they Dragon Breath farm us all the way down. We're able to grab the final shield here. Still a tricky situation, but we're able to swap out lightly, catching a resisted Aqua Tail onto our Rayquaza. Really nice play there. They come back in with the Mewtwo, of course. All shields are down. So, Psy Strike, barely not going to get the KO once again there. Again, that is really unfortunate for us as we give them slightly extra energy. Tyranitar comes in. The opponent goes for a Shadow Ball, which does not get the KO. So, we farm up to back-to-back Brutal Swings. We need Brutal Swing to get the KO up against the Palkia, but unfortunately, they banked the Charge Move anyways. I don't think Brutal Swing would KO regardless. Aqua Tail certainly takes us out, though, and unfortunately, we do lose that game. But into the next battle, another Zacian in the lead. So once again, going to be safe swapping into our Salamence. And again, the opponent doesn't really need to swap out of this matchup. If they know about Fire Blast, then of course they should be shielding here. However, we are going to go for a Brutal Swing. So hopefully they do end up shielding. Brutal Swing, unfortunately not shielded. However, they might expect to completely wall us now. So they continue to overfarm. And as a result, Fire Blast gets the KO there. Of course, could have taken them out slightly earlier if we didn't bait, but either way, it's still the same result. We can now go for a Brutal Swing, and Brutal Swing is going to be shielded by the Palkia. Now, we should be able to live an Aqua Tail, so we are going to no-shield the first charge move. The opponent goes for Aqua Tail, and we can live that and reach another Brutal Swing. Now, likewise, the opponent should live a Brutal Swing from this range, but they're going to double shield and then commit to a full Dragon Breath farm down. This puts us in a really tricky situation here, but we try and go for the catch. It doesn't work out, and now we're definitely going to have to shield. The opponent is going to go for a Spatial Rend, they full send, but they swap out into Necrozma, and we're able to outpace, reaching the Dragon Ascent. Dragon Ascent, such a strong move. Once again, it gets the one-shot, and we can actually Dragon Tail, farm down the Palkia before they reach another Spatial Rend, and so we're able to take that game. Into next battle, we're going to see Shiny Palkia in the lead this time around. We're able to swap out, immediately catching an Aqua Tail, which is going to be resisted on our Salamence, and the opponent's going to come in with a Rhyperior. Now, this is an interesting swap here, but we can go for a Brutal Swing, going to look to throw on CMP with a potential Rock Wrecker, and at this point, we are actually just going to no-shield this, and the opponent full sends a Rock Wrecker, getting the KO, but now we can come in with the Rayquaza. Rayquaza is going to reach a Breaking Swipe on the CMP tire with the next Rock Wrecker. Are they going to shield here? The opponent's going to let the Rhyperior go down. We are still very healthy, of course, as they were on Mud Slap, but they're now going to come in with Reshiram, and we actually go for a slight overfarm here. We're going to no-shield, as again, we realize this is just going to be a Fusion Flare bait. We can now go for Breaking Swipe, and Breaking Swipe is going to be shielded by the opponent. They swap back into Palkia. We're going to look to overfarm. We're at back-to-back Brutal Swings here. Brutal Swing, number 1, going to be shielded by the Palkia, and now I assume we just look to overfarm in this matchup. Brutal Swing won't quite get the the KO from this range just yet, but with more Dragon Breath damage, Brutal Swing should now be enough damage to KO. Brutal Swing is going to get the knockout. They come back in with their Reshiram, and again, no Stone Edge, but it doesn't really matter. Dragon Breaths hitting for super effective. Brutal Swing barely doesn't get the KO, but a couple more Dragon Breaths gets the full farm down, and we take that game. Now into the next battle, the opponent is going to be safe swapping into a Zamazenta. This time around, since we're staying in, we're going for a Brutal Swing bait, but they end up no-shielding there, calling the bait. But again, do they expect to wall the energy here? We go for Fire Blast, and Fire Blast gets the KO. So this is quite tricky with the baiting here, because a Brutal Swing is just going to do hardly any damage at all up against a Zacian or a Zamazenta, and sometimes they do actually end up shielding the Fire Blast. But either way, we're still in a great position here. We're going to come in with the Rayquaza, unfortunately losing CMP up against the Kyurem White, but we do force them to throw their energy straight away as they go straight for Freeze Shock. We can now go for a full farm down, and their final Pokemon is going to be Necrozma, and luckily for us, we've got access to Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing, of course, double super effective damage here, but can we reach 3 of them before they fully farm us down? We go for Brutal Swing number 2. Brutal Swing gets the KO, the opponent realizing we were going to get to a 3rd one anyways, and so we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we're going to see Landorus in the lead. We swap out straight away into Shadow Salamence, and the opponent actually comes in with a Ho-Oh. This is a fine matchup for us. Of course, Brutal Swing not going to deal that much damage, but the opponent, in trying to throw on good timing, allows us to reach a 2nd Brutal Swing before they even go for a Sacred Fire. Now from this range, even resisted Sacred Fire should KO, but they actually go for Brave Bird, which allows us to get the full farm down. Let's see what the opponent wants to do here. The opponent is going to come back in with the Landorus, and we're going to full send a Fire Blast. But wait a second. The opponent able to catch that onto Primarina. That is a crazy catch there. But we are now going to come in with the Tyranitar. Of course, Primarina is going to decimate this team. However, with the Fire Blast and the Brutal Swing damage landing, we've put them into range where we can just Dragon Tail farm them down. Still going to be very tricky as they do have Landorus in the back. We are going to come in with the Rayquaza. They swap out straight away, and at this point I think we might have to call a bait. The opponent full sends the Stone Edge, however, and even though they're on Mudshot dealing less damage this season, also double resisted, I think they will be able to fully farm us down even with a debuff to their attack stat. And unfortunately, they've just got so much energy here. We are going to shield, put this game over. They can actually bait with a Sandsear Storm. They even make a Brutal Swing catch. Not that this was necessary, but Brutal Swing gonna be taken out the Primarina. Really nice play by the opponent in this game. And unfortunately, Sandsear Storm gets the knockout, and we end up losing that game. But into the next battle, I can see Yveltal in the lead. Great matchup for the Tyranitar. The opponent going to be safe swapping into a Dialga, and we are going to shield an Iron Head as we throw it on CMP. Now, the awkward thing about Tyranitar in the Open Master League is that we do end up losing CMP to most Pokemon, just because a lot of these legendaries are, of course, very attack-weighted. But we come in with Rayquaza, and they full send the Roar of Time. We were calling a bait. Doesn't work out for us. And unfortunately, we have now lost switch advantage. But we can come back in with the Tyranitar Brutal Swing. Not going to be able to get the KO from this range, but hopefully that puts them into perfect farm down range, and it does exactly that. They now come in with a Groudon, so we're going straight for Fire Blast. Fire Blast, gonna connect, does big damage. We swap out into our Shadow Salamence, and the opponent comes in with Yveltal. We are now gonna go for a Brutal Swing bait here. Quite risky, but the opponent gonna use their final shield. And at this point, we're gonna need to shield here as Tyranitar is incredibly low. So we're now gonna try and commit to a Fire Blast, and we're able to get there. They just boosted up the defense, but Fire Blast doesn't care. It gets the KO anyways. They come back in with the Groudon, and we're able to reach a Brutal Swing before they end up throwing. Not really sure what the opponent was farming to, but either way, Brutal Swing gets the KO. And I guess straight away into the next battle, we're going to see Mewtwo in the lead. They're now going to come in with a Metagross. They are core broken by the Tyranitar right now. We're going to go for a Brutal Swing. They are at least on Bullet Punch Metagross, however. So, of course, dealing big damage with the Fast Food pressure. Not quite as much pressure as they would have had last season, however, as, of course, Bullet Punch did get nerfed. But Fire Blast is unfortunately shielded by the Metagross. I believe this is going to be an under-leveled Metagross as well, so we're going to go straight for Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing barely doesn't quite get the KO there. We're going to look to shield this. However, I believe the opponent should be swapping back into Mewtwo and sniping with a Side Strike. Side Strike gets the KO, but we can come back in with the Tyranitar, and they threw straight away, so they have no residual energy, meaning we barely outpace them by a single turn, and Brutal Swing gets the KO. We now come in with Rayquaza just to fully Dragon Tail farm down the Metagross. Their final Pokemon gonna be a Palkia, and we can win CMP, going straight for Dragon Ascent. Dragon Ascent gets the one-shot, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we're going to see another Metagross. This time they are going to be fully powered up, but they're on Shadow Claw, which of course is resisted damage. It's going to allow them to get to the Meteor Mashes a lot faster. However, this makes this matchup a lot more comfortable for the Tyranitar. Of course, they are still resisting the Dragon Breath damage, so it's not exactly incredibly dominant for the Tyranitar because Brutal Swing actually won't quite get the KO here, but we can potentially look to try and make a catch, but no, it's actually the opponent looking to make the catch there, catching a Brutal Swing onto a Garchomp. This is still a fine matchup for us, and we can still outpace them to another Brutal Swing before they can get to a Sand Tomb or a Twister, and we're now going to swap out. Have we caught the Sand Tomb this time around here? The opponent goes for the Twister. That is unfortunate for us. I guess, maybe Sand Tomb just isn't the play in the Open Master League. But either way, Twister, number 2, gets the KO there. But they are fairly low. We can probably Dragon Breath farm them down with the Tyranitar if we just come back in with it. And we're able to do so before they reach another charge move. They're going to come in with a Purified Kyogre. Not ideal for the Tyranitar, but we can swap back into our Salamence. The opponent going to go for the Avalanche, which of course we have to shield as that is going to hit for double super effective damage. The opponent now going for Meteor Mash, dealing huge damage there. But can we reach back-to-back Brutal Swings? Brutal Swing, number 1. Gets the KO. Can we live the waterfall damage? We are actually just barely able to do so. Actually, I think the opponent just gets one turn. Bring in lag there. Yes, you can see that is the case. But now we've got the Fire Blast, and this is resisted damage. But Fire Blast, non-stab, still takes out the Kyogre from that range, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we see another Zacian in the lead, and are we going to be able to land another Fire Blast up against an unsuspecting Zacian user? We are going to shield the Behemoth Blade here. Again, we are going to go for a Brutal Swing bait here. Honestly, I don't feel like any Zacian know about Fire Blast on the Salamence, so again, they no shield, but maybe that just gives them a full sense of security, as again, they no shield the Fire Blast, we get the KO, and now they come in with a Shadow Kyogre this time around, but we've got the Brutal Swing already. Brutal Swing is going to be no shielded, as of course we've already revealed both the Brutal Swing and the Fire Blast, but here we make a catch. Have we caught an Avalanche? Yes, we're able to do so. Really nice play there by Reptilian82, and we're still going to be able to reach a Brutal Swing before they waterfall farm us down. We are going to grab the shield there. We can now come in with Rayquaza. They're not going to reach back-to-back Avalanches, so we're going to shield the first, commit to the full farm down, but they're going to have a Shadow Ho-Oh in the back. We can now go for a Breaking Swipe here. Breaking Swipe, of course, going to debuff their attack stat. However, this is still a Shadow Ho-Oh we're talking about, so the opponent is going to go for the Brave Bird, and unfortunately, Brave Bird takes out the Rayquaza, and we end up losing that game. But into the next battle, we're going to see a Metagross in the lead, and once again, they're on Shadow Claw, so this is a slightly better matchup here for the Tyranitar, as we can very comfortably outpace them and go straight for Brutal Swings. The opponent going to go for Meteor Mash, which would pretty much one-shot the Tyranitar. We are now going to look to try and swap and make another catch of the Octel, this time onto our Rayquaza, where of course it is resisted damage. The opponent's still going to outpace us to the next Octel. However, again, this is resisted. We don't really care about that, and we're just going to look to overfarm in this matchup, throw as late as possible, give as minimal farm as possible to the Metagross if they choose to no shield here. And you see the opponent only gets off 3 Shadow Claws before farming us down. We can come back in with Tyranitar, and the opponent makes a very nice catch there, actually, catching Brutal Swing onto a Kieran White, but we are going to look to overfarm in this matchup, farming up to back-to-back Brutal Swings, but remember, the opponent does not know we don't have Stone Edge, but they no-shield anyways, but we're going to swap out and catch a resisted Fusion Flare onto our Shadow Salamence. That is a huge catch for us. They come back in with the Metagross, and they're going to look to overfarm, which means we can now reach a Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing, gotta be no-shielded, and it gets them very low, to the point where we can actually just no-shield this. They're not going to reach 2 more Meteor Mashes, which means we can just safely shield in this matchup, commit to a full Dragon Breath farm down. We don't need the Brutal Swing, we get the full farm down, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we're going to see Kieran White here in the lead. The opponent's going to be safe swapping into their Palkia, and unfortunately we do throw slightly late there, ending up losing CMP in this matchup, which isn't ideal for us, but we can still live the Octel fairly comfortably. Fire off the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing going to be no-shielded, and here we're going to look to catch the next Octel onto our Rayquaza. So of course, that is resisted damage. We can now go for the full Dragon Tail farm down, and let's see what they want to do. They're going to come in with the Kieran, and we can go straight for Breaking Swipe. However, Breaking Swipe going to debuff their attack stat. That might just give them a bigger farm down here, but the opponent, nope, they're not committing to a full farm down, instead going straight for Fusion Flare. That's fine with us. Tyranitar does still have some energy here, but we're going to come in with the Salamence instead, and we're actually able to reach a Brutal Swing before they get to the next move. Brutal Swing gonna be no shielded, and unfortunately they can still reach a potential Ice Burn, so we shield. It is just a Fusion Flare bait, but their final Pokemon is going to be a Kyogre. We can farm up to back-to-back Brutal Swings, of course. Fire Blast doesn't really make sense here, as of course it is resisted damage, but we end up grabbing the final shield. We're going to shield as they full send the Avalanche. We can farm up to back-to-back Brutal Swings once again. Actually, never mind. We are just going to full send a Fire Blast. Fire Blast coming through. Barely doesn't get the KO there, but it should be fine. They're in, of course, range where a single Dragon Breath will farm them down. We don't need the Brutal Swing, and we're able to take that game. Now going into, I believe, the final battle of this video, once again leading into Metagross, and again they're on Shadow Claw. So we're going to go for Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing is going to be no shielded, and you see it doesn't really put them into range. We can farm down with any of our Pokemon, so not actually the most comfortable matchup for us. However, we can go for another Brutal Swing, and then potentially look to try and catch a move onto Rayquaza. The opponent's going to come in with their Kyurem, but that's fine with us. We lose CMP, but this is not going to be a Freeze Burn, so we're just going to no shield. Nope, it's an Ancient Power. Oh my gosh, that is not ideal. Wait, is it even called Freeze Burn, Freeze Shock, Ice Burn? Ice Burn is the one, I think. I get them mixed up. I don't really use Kyurem at all. Well, I don't actually have either of these forms of Kyurem. But either way, we're going to no shield. Ancient Power doesn't get the KO this time around, but it does get us incredibly low. We're going to go for a Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing, gonna get the knockout. They come back in with the Metagross. We're actually going to bank the Brutal Swing and instead come in with our Salamence, realizing, of course, we would lose CMP up against the Metagross. But now they come in with a Ho-Oh. We can go for Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing not really dealing that much damage here, but these Dragon Tails are going to add up over time. At this point, the opponent is going to be forced to shield. However, again, they cannot store back-to-back charge moves here. So the opponent goes for Sacred Fire. That is not enough damage to get the KO. So we come back in with Tyranitar. We can snipe with the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing doesn't KO either. But wait a second here. We can now go for a Brutal Swing on the Salamence. Salamence, of course, going to get the knockout. And then one more Dragon Tail farms down the Ho-Oh to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know. And as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.